Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of Meezan lecture series. We are studying the social Shariah of Islam as interpreted by Ustaz Javed Ahmed Ghamidi. We have covered various topics, and today we are going to continue with the topic that we started in our previous session, which was divorce. This is a very important area that we have to understand, and because of the fact that there are a number of misconceptions which prevail amongst Muslims regarding the procedure of divorce as well as the real way in which it has to be carried out, keeping in view the letter and spirit of the law, that we need to understand it in a very deep way. We have been following through the whole issue by studying various verses of Surah Talaq. We know that this is the 65th surah of the Quran, and it is in this surah that the issue of talaq is primarily discussed. However, there are explanations and certain additions to this very basic statement in Surah Baqarah in the relevant verses. So we have also been referring to that, and we had reached a stage in which the issue at hand was that if two divorces, if the opportunity availed by a person to give two divorces has been availed, what if he exercises this opportunity the third time? So remember, we had seen that in the first two situations, in the first option, if a person takes back his wife in the divorce period, which is called the iddat period, then he can again avail this chance a second time. If once again situation arises in which the husband is forced to give this divorce, then he can again do it, and he can take his wife back within the iddat period, which is 3 menstrual cycles. But if this situation arises for a third time, then it is not possible for the husband to take his wife back. In that case, she'll stand permanently separated from him once the iddat period passes, and then normally in naturally arisen circumstances, if she marries someone and then again due to naturally arisen circumstances the person that she marries divorces her, only then can she marry the first husband. And this, it seems, is because the Quran wants this divorce not to become child play. People should be very careful in delivering the divorce sentence, and as we see today that it is often uttered in anger, often uttered thoughtlessly, often uttered without taking due or giving due regard to the iddat period. So all these things have been circumvented by the Quran, and the Quran is adamant on the fact that the person who would like to divorce his wife, he has to have a calculated intention. It should not be out of a rage or fury or frenzy that he should ultimately deliver the divorce sentence. It has to be a well thought out decision. And if it is not a well thought out decision, then as we shall see today, the Prophet has asked the intention of the person who divorced his wife more than one time. And when he said that, well, his intention was just once, then the Prophet accepted his intention, which tells us how important it is to realize that the intention behind a certain divorce procedure is also to be taken into account. Also emphasized in our last session was this very important area that before even entering into this divorce procedure, it is all important that the husband realize that before he gives this divorce, there is another step which the Quran has suggested, and that is that two arbitrators should be appointed between amongst the family of the bride and the bridegroom. So one from the side of the husband and another from the side of the wife. They should sit together and try to reconcile the two and try to achieve that reconciliation, which the two could not have done or were not able to do directly. Only if they fail, if these arbitrators fail, should this divorce procedure be initiated. So even this shows that how important the Quran wants this divorce procedure to be delayed as much as possible. And if personal negotiations between the two are not successful, then negotiations between the arbitrators should be carried out. So as far as this procedure is concerned, I have just described it. In the case of the third divorce, if he utters this divorce the third time, then she or the wife would not be allowed to him unless, as I said, she takes someone else as her husband, and then again out of naturally arisen circumstances, this happens that he also divorces her, only then she will be allowed for the first husband. Now, our jurists have added a condition to this, and they say that she'll only be allowed for the first husband or to the first husband if she has had sexual intimacy with the second husband, and if that has taken place, then only that divorce will be valid. And although there are other reasons that they present, but primarily there is a narrative of the Prophet which has been cited by them, and which in fact is, if we understand it, is something which is to the contrary. It gives an exactly contrary interpretation to what it has been generally presented. So the general interpretation is that if after the third divorce, if the wife has to marry once again the first husband, then that cannot be done, of course, until she marries someone else. And for this they say that that marriage will, unless it is consummated and then the divorce is given, only then the wife will be allowed for the first husband. And for this they have also invented a very shameful subterfuge which is also called halala. So what people do often is, or they are advised is, that this takes the form of a very planned endeavor, a planned campaign, and that is that someone is culled out, someone is picked out as a person with whom the wife would marry, and then she spends one night in which there is sexual intimacy with that new husband, and with the understanding that that husband would divorce her as soon as that night passes, so that she is allowed for the first husband. So this is like a planned strategy or a subterfuge, which is a shameless thing or a shameful thing, and it is called halala. And there are people who are specially qualified or specially trained for this purpose, which of course is even more shameful. And as I said, the very reason of this sexual intercourse being essential for that marriage to consummate, and then of course to have it dissolved, has been interpreted from a hadith of the Prophet. Now, I'm now just going to present before you that narrative of the Prophet, and at the same time we will see how this is something which does not at all hold well in any case. And the narrative, if not, it actually gives us the entirely opposite interpretation. And so this is a narrative which has been presented as I said, in favor of the fact that the husband and the wife, if they have gone through this procedure for the third time, then this will only be allowed if the wife has consummated her marriage with the second husband. So the narrative that is now being displayed before you. So this is a narrative. This is recorded in major hadith books. So, for example, I'm going to read out a text from Bukhari. So this is narrated from Ikrimah. So Ikrimah narrates that Rafa divorced his wife. Thereafter, she married Abdurrahman ibn Zubair al-Qurazi. Aisha says that she came to her wearing a green cloak and complained of her husband and showed her bruises, and women do help one another. So when the Prophet came by, Aisha said, I have only seen Muslim women being treated in such a way. Her skin is greener than her cloak. Ikrimah says that when her husband came to know that she had complained to the Prophet, he also came over to the Prophet along with his two sons from his other wife. Upon seeing her husband, she got hold of the end of her cloak, letting it hang from her hand, and remarked, My only complaint is that whatever he has is no more than this soft cloth. At this, Abdurrahman said, O Prophet of Allah, she has told a lie. I am very strong and can satisfy her. The truth of the matter is that she is disobedient and wants to go back to Rafah. When the Prophet heard this, he said, If this is the case, then you shall not be permissible. If this is the case, then you shall not be permissible for Rafah unless Abdurrahman tastes you. Then upon seeing the sons of Abdurrahman, the Prophet remarked, Are these your sons? When he replied in the affirmative, the Prophet said, Do you tell such lies, O Abdurrahman's wife? By God, these young boys resemble Abdurrahman more than a crow resembles another crow. So you see, this is the narrative which has been used by, or which people think actually tell us that if the third divorce has taken place, then sexual intercourse or sexual intimacy is essential. And the words which you can see are used by in this narrative are the reason that it has been said that unless Abdur Rahman tastes you, you will not be able to go back. So you see, the fact is that the wife, if we study this narrative closely, we'll see that the narrative actually tells us that she actually wanted to become allowable or permissible for her first husband. And for this, she concocted a story that Abdur Rahman or his first husband, the second husband, is not in a position to satisfy her sexually. And you can see the Arabs are very frank in such situations. And she actually compared the erection of Abdur Rahman by saying that, well, all that he has is this soft cloth, trying to tell the Prophet that he is not able to consummate his marriage and he is not able to penetrate her. And the Prophet immediately realized that she's lying, because he saw the sons of Abdur Rahman standing right beside him, and as he remarked that they resemble Abdur Rahman just as a crow resembles a crow, telling her that how can she say this, because if he has produced these two sons, how can she complain that her husband is not able to satisfy her? So what he actually remarked was that, well, you can only go back to your first husband if you are able to taste Abdur Rahman. This actually means that the Prophet was telling her that because you think that your second husband is impotent, and because of the fact that you are lying, of course, as the Prophet said, so you can only go back to your first husband if you are able to have this sexual intercourse with your second husband, which according to you is not possible because you think that he is impotent. So you see, clearly the narrative is telling us the entirely opposite story. It's not that the narrative is telling us that sexual intercourse is essential for the husband and the second husband and the wife to have taken place for her to go back to the first husband. All that this is telling us is that this lady had come to the Prophet trying to establish this fact that her second husband was impotent and was not able to satisfy her, and she wanted to go back to her first husband. And the Prophet immediately realized that this is the case because he saw that they had children, and how can he be impotent if he has children? So he uttered these very subtle words that you can only go back to your first husband if you're able to have this sexual intercourse with your second husband, implying the fact you'll not be able to have it because according to you, he is impotent. So the Prophet was actually making this point, and unfortunately it has been understood the opposite way. And as I said, now we have these shameful institutions of halala in which people, when they are somehow entangled in this situation that they have given the third divorce and now they would like to go back to their first wife, then that wife is made to have nikah with that person who is hired for this purpose, and then he spends one night with his wife or the wife who is to be made permissible. They have this intercourse, and then the next day he divorces her so that she can go back to the first husband. This is such a pathetic and such a thing that we cannot even look up to when we see how people have entered into this and how they have made up this. On the contrary, we also find narratives which say that the Prophet has cursed the person who does halala. La'anallahu al-muhallil, and the Prophet has said that the Almighty has in fact cursed the person who does halala, and he has been called with a very bad name as well. So in spite of this narrative being present in our literature, we still see that this shameful trade is still rampant. So we have to be absolutely clear that as far as the third divorce is concerned, if this happens, then this should not be a planned, I would say it's like a conspiracy. It's like something that is planned, that you marry a third husband, or you marry a husband and you go back to the first husband by having intimacy with that person. So remember, if the Quran has placed this condition or this restriction, it is not as a matter that you have to follow this through this planning. It is basically something that has to be observed in naturally arisen circumstances. So what the Quran implies here is that if she marries someone else in normal circumstances, and then in that marriage out of naturally arisen circumstances, she gets divorced. Now she can come back to the first husband. So this is not to be a planned activity. It has to be a natural activity. And unfortunately, it is done through this planning. And then we see so many families getting ruined, and then coming back to their original husbands in such a horrific way that we are not even able to raise our heads in shame that what exactly is going on with people. So now let us proceed with our divorce, and we were talking about the procedure of divorce. So we will also now talk about two important violations of giving divorce. So one we have already covered in our last session, in which Abdullah ibn Umar was guilty of divorcing his wife in the menstrual cycle. We know that it is essential that wives can only or should only be divorced in the period of purity, in which the husband does not have had any sexual contact with his wife. But Abdullah ibn Umar did so in the time of his own, in the era of the Prophet, in fact, and he was told by the Prophet to do it again. He must revoke this divorce and then wait for his wife to come out of this period of menstruation, and then in the period of purity was he prescribed or asked that he should conduct, or she should go ahead with this divorce. The second is also a case which is reported in books of hadith. I'm going to read out a text which is found in Abu Dawud, and this says that it is actually by Rukana ibn Abd Yazid. So by gathering all the narratives of this case, the whole situation that comes to light is that he had divorced his wife 3 times in one go. He then felt ashamed and presented his case before the Prophet. The Prophet inquired, How did you divorce her? He replied, I divorced her 3 times in one go. The Prophet again inquired, What was your intention? He answered that he wanted to divorce her once only. The Prophet told him to reply on oath, which he did, and then said, If this is the matter, then take her back. Only one divorce has been implemented. Rukana remarked, O Prophet of God, I had divorced her 3 times. The Prophet said, I know, take her back, and this is not the proper way of divorcing a wife. The Almighty has said that if one must divorce his wife, he should do so, keeping in consideration the iddah. So you see, the second violation had also occurred in the times of the Prophet, and instead of the prescribed one divorce sentence, Rukana ibn Abd Yazid, the person in question here, he in his anger, he uttered 3 divorces in one go, consecutively. And then he felt ashamed. He said that, well, he did not intend. And when the Prophet asked him on oath, he said, well, my intention was just to give one divorce. So the Prophet, this shows, was very adamant in this regard, and said, well, in this case, only one divorce will be implemented, because in this case, we will seek your intention and we will be guided by your intention and not by your frenzy. So if you have given these 3 divorces and you knew yourself that you had no intention of giving these 3 divorces, your only intention was to give one divorce. So the Prophet immediately asked him that you can take her wife back, because if he had accepted all those 3 divorces, then she would have been permanently separated from him. And the Prophet said, this is not the case, because your intention was not that you would divorce her 3 times. And Rukana actually ended up taking her back, which also tells us that in case of a violation, the intention of the person who has committed this violation will be accepted, and especially if he describes his intention on oath. And giving one divorce is what has been prescribed by the Quran, and doing so more than once is something, especially if it is done in frenzy and or in fury and rage, without intention. And the Prophet has given us this guidance that it has to be taken not on the face of it, but what the intention of the person was. So the foundations on which this decision of the Prophet are based in both the above quoted cases are, now this is how Ustaz Javed Ahmed Ghamidi is surmising the conclusions of both these cases. Remember, one case was with Abdullah ibn Umar, in which he had divorced his wife when she was passing through a menstrual cycle, and the second one is the one that we just studied, that that a lady was divorced by Rukana ibn Abd Yazid, who was his wife, and he did it 3 times, whereas his intention was just once. So Ustaz, after citing both these incidents, has surmised certain points which I am just going to read out for your reference. So the first thing that he has said is that if divorce is not given according to the prescribed procedure, but there is a possibility to make amends for the violation, then the sanctity of the law demands that amends should be made. So the first conclusion is that if violation of the procedure is undertaken and you can remedy the situation by redoing it, then it has to be done again. So the remedy, if the remedy is possible, then it should be done so. The second thing is that the person has right to explain his statements. If he says that a particular statement was uttered by him without any intention or with full intention, his explanation can be accepted, as is the case that we just saw, that Rukana ibn Abdi Yazid said that he had no intention of divorcing his wife 3 times, but he ended up doing so in anger. So this gives us this guidance that the Prophet, when he inquired about him regarding his intention, he clearly said that he had no intention of divorcing her 3 times, which tells us that the intention of the person shall be inquired of. The third thing that Ustaz has mentioned here is that if a person says that he has divorced his wife 3 times, then this can mean that he has in fact divorced her 3 times, and this can also be a statement that portrays the severity and intensity of his decision. Since both these possibilities exist, then when these words are said, hence any explanation of the speaker regarding the meaning in which he used them should also be acceptable. Again, this is something that if you have divorced your wife 3 times, it could be that you have in fact used up all those three chances that you were given, these 3 opportunities, and you actually said that I'm using them again, although this is not recommended. But yes, in extreme circumstances, if a person does so and he says that I am out of my own will and full understanding, I'm using all those 3 chances and I'm just divorcing her. Yes, that could be one thing. And of course, another thing can be that whatever he said has been said out of intensity and anger, as I just referred to. And in that case, his intention will be accepted if it's, of course, it satisfied the person who is arbitrating. So in this regard, we have to understand that this does not mean that if there exists evidence to the contrary to the explanation made, then such an explanation has to be accepted. A court has full authority to reject such an explanation if it is not satisfied. So when Umar observed that people were no longer careful in uttering the divorce sentence, he declared that he would not even accept a statement of explanation from the husband, and 3 divorces pronounced would be counted as 3. We know this famous incident which took place in the times of the Caliph Umar, when he saw that people were misusing this intention, that whenever they would be asked, they would do so. They would divorce their wives several times, and whenever they would be asked, they would say, well, we just wanted once. And they were like playing with the law. So the Caliph said, Umar said, that next time this is not going to happen. I'm going to implement this decision that whatever your intention, if you do it more than once, I will implement it the times that you do it. So he implemented those 3 divorces. Again, it was an administrative decision, not a decision of the Shariah. It was a particular decision in which the intention of the person, he said, would not be taken into account because of the circumstances that had arisen. As I said, this should not become a precedent to the fact that whenever the 3 divorces have been uttered in one go, then that they shall be accepted. And unfortunately, in some Muslim countries, this is the law, that these 3 divorces, when they are uttered one after the other consecutively, they are implemented following the procedure which Umar anhu had outlined, not withstanding the fact that he had done so by announcing it, that in such cases no intention would be accepted, because people are now making fun and they fully know the procedure of divorce and they make fun of it. So circumstances today, of course, are entirely different. A very great population amongst Muslims does not even know the correct procedure of divorce. Hence, invoking what Caliph Umar did would be not the wise thing to do here, because he did so when people were absolutely aware of the procedure of divorce and they were actually misusing it. But here, of course, it is not a question of misusing it at all. It is, on the contrary, a question of being ignorant of the procedure of divorce. So this distinction has to be made. Next, we come to the very important area or the directive of iddat, which of course we know is called the waiting period. So first, that we know from the Quran, وَالْمُطَلَّقَاتُ يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوءٍ, and divorced women must keep themselves waiting for 3 menstrual cycles. So this is verse 228 of Surah Baqarah, which has actually signified the fact that the menstrual cycles should be 3. Now, Ustaz has made another very important observation here, that the word qar in Arabic refers to menstruation, and it also refers to the period of purity. It can mean both. So it is among the azdad, as we say. It has opposite meanings. And he said that he has interpreted it to be to signify the period of menstruation, because it is through this period that it can be ascertained whether a lady is pregnant or not through the period of purity. So this is one important area that we have to understand, that the word qar has both meanings, but the reason it has been interpreted as menstruation is because basically it is the menstrual cycle which would tell us that a lady is pregnant or not. Of course, if she has those cycles, then this would absolutely be a certainty that she is not pregnant. So in normal circumstances, the iddat is 3 menstrual cycles. However, if a woman does not menstruate because of advancing age, or in spite of reaching puberty, she does not menstruate, then the Quran has specified in Surah Talaq that this period would be 3 months. It has also been stated that the iddat of a pregnant lady extends to childbirth. So again, some more explanation regarding the directives of iddat, that for pregnant women, the iddat will finish after childbirth. And for women who reaching their menstrual age, still they don't menstruate, the Quran says if there is any doubt, again, the iddat would be 3 months. And if a woman does not menstruate because of advancing age, is also something that if there is any confusion about it, then her iddat would be 3 months. So in this regard, another very important thing is that if there is no sexual contact between the husband and the wife and divorce takes place, the Quran says there will be no iddat. Now this clearly tells us that the real reason for iddat is whether a lady is pregnant or not, because of course if there is no sexual contact, there is no question of any pregnancy, which would mean there is no iddat period. Moreover, we also know that as soon as the child is delivered, the iddat period finishes. Both these two stipulations tell us that the real reason for observing iddah is whether a lady is pregnant or not, which therefore means today that if a lady, it can be ascertained by a doctor, and he can state this with reasonable certainty that she is not pregnant, then she does not require to observe the iddat period at all. So the directive which is mentioned in the Quran of observing this, of the fact that if a woman and a man have gotten divorced without having sexual intimacy, then there shall be no iddat, is now be displayed before you. This is Surah Ahzab. It says, believers, when you marry women and then divorce them before you have touched them, no period of iddat have they for you which you can ask them to complete. So this clearly tells us that the Quran has made its verdict, it has given its verdict that only in case of pregnancy is iddat to be observed. So as far as the directives of iddat which have been mentioned in Surah Talaq that we have been discussing earlier on in our previous session, they are concerned, they have also been summarized by Ustaz Ghamidi, and I'm just going to briefly read out what he has summarized. So the first thing that he has said is that during iddat, neither should a wife leave her house, nor is the husband authorized to turn her out from her house. Living together in this way might hopefully be beneficial for both, and they might reconcile and thus save a family from breaking. So you see, this is very important to note, contrary to the practice that we observe today, that as soon as men divorce their wives, they immediately leave the place and they go and start living with their parents. On the contrary, the Quran says that the husband should not turn her out, nor should she herself go away from that house, because the purpose is to live together in that iddat period, and if there is any chance of reconciliation, it should be benefited from. It could be beneficial living under the same roof. So a warning is sounded that the directives mentioned are the bounds set by God, and anyone who tries to exceed them would not harm God in any way. On the contrary, he would only harm his own well-being. So how important it is has just been underscored. The only exception to the above directive is if the basis on which a divorce has been given is open lewdness, which the Quran has termed as fahishatum mubayyana. We have already discussed this, that, well, yes, if the husband has to turn out his wife, then this can only be when she is guilty of adultery. Otherwise, he has no right to turn her out when he has given her the divorce. She has to live with her during that iddat period. Secondly, it is stated that a husband should provide residence and maintenance to his divorced wife according to his status. So, in this time when she is living with him in the iddat period, he must not be stingy. He should provide her her maintenance as well her residence according to his own means. And it is obvious that the pronouncement of the third divorce, also a husband shall be responsible to provide residence and maintenance to the divorced wife. The reason is that a lady accepts to remain in iddat only to ascertain whether she is the mother of his child or not. It is to protect his lineage that she has undertaken this weight. And the verse has been quoted here. So, the above quoted verse of Surah Ahzab clearly points to the fact that if pregnancy is a possibility, then observing the iddat is an obligation imposed on the wife from the husband. Indeed, after the third divorce, a husband does not have any right to revoke his decision and take back his wife. However, as a result of this, the only thing that can be revoked is their living together. In no way can the responsibility to provide her with residence and maintenance be revoked. This is also a very important conclusion, that after the third divorce, the only thing, because now after the third divorce, there is no chance for them to reconcile. They just cannot come back. The only option, as I said, is that she marries someone else, and out of naturally arisen circumstances, he divorces her, and then she can come back. So, because this is not possible, so if this option is exercised for the third time, then she will not be liable to live with her husband, but the husband is still liable to provide her maintenance and residence. So he will arrange for her to live in some other place and also give her maintenance during this period. So, besides the above mentioned directive, the Almighty has given a further directive in Surah Baqarah that no lady should try to conceal her pregnancy during iddat. Because we know that in the early stages of pregnancy, and of course in the middle stages, somehow women can wrap themselves up in a way that pregnancy is not revealed, but the Quran says that this is not on, because she is now the mother of the husband's child. So therefore she must reveal this, because the iddat has to be governed on the basis of this. And for this the Quran has said, and divorced women must keep themselves waiting for 3 menstrual cycles, and it is unlawful for them, if they believe in Allah and the last day, to hide what He has created in their wombs. So now we come to the part in which, if the husband wants his wife to suckle the child after divorce, so what should be done? In this regard, let me read out the relevant places or the relevant part of Surah Baqarah, just a translation which will tell us that if the husband would like his divorced wife to suckle the child, what should be done? And after this divorce also, mothers shall suckle their offspring for 2 whole years for those who desire to complete the term. And the child's father in such a case shall have to bear the cost of their food and clothing according to the norms. No one should be burdened beyond his capacity. Neither shall the mother be treated unfairly because of her child, nor the father on account of his child. And his heir shall be accountable in the same way. But if they both decide on weaning by mutual consent, and after due consultation, there is no blame on them. And if you decide to engage someone else to suckle your offspring, there is no blame on you, provided you pay the mother in accordance with the norms of the society what you promised, and fear God, and know that God sees well what you do. So God knows what you do. So therefore, this scenario of the post-divorce scenario, of course, is a scenario of suckling, and you can see how the Quran has summarized these directives. And Ustaz Amin Hassan Islahi has been cited by Ustaz Javed and Ghamidi. He says that a summary of what has been just stipulated in these verses of Surah Baqarah is in order, and he cites Ustaz Islahi in this regard. And I'm just going to read out what Ustaz Islahi has written, because he has been cited by Ghamidi. So the first thing is that it is the responsibility of a divorced lady to suckle her offspring for 2 full years in case the husband wants her to complete the total suckling period. Second, during this period, it is the responsibility of the father to provide his divorced wife with food and clothing, keeping in view the norms of the society. In other words, the status of the husband, the needs of the divorced wife, and her own status shall be kept in consideration while providing her this maintenance. This is obviously understood. 3. Neither of the parties shall be burdened beyond their capacity. Neither the mother shall be harmed in any way by taking advantage of the fact that she is the mother of the child, nor the father be unduly pressurized in any way on the pretext that he is the father of the child. 4. If the father of the child is dead, his heirs will be responsible for all the above mentioned rights and obligations. 5. If through mutual consent and consultation, the estranged husband and wife decide to terminate the suckling period before 2 years, they can do so. 6. If the child's father or, in his absence, the heirs of the child want to suckle the child through some other lady instead of the mother, they are authorized to do so, provided what has been agreed with the mother regarding her maintenance is fully honored. So remember, in this case also, if some other lady is called for suckling the child, then whatever maintenance was promised with the mother, that shall still be given to her, even if she is not suckling the child, because, of course, the commitment was already made. Now, as far as this post-divorce scenario is concerned, there is another thing which often plagues men especially, and that is their sense of honor. And if the wife who has now been separated from him and she's now an independent person, if she would like to marry someone else, there was this custom in the Arab society and, of course, in many other societies, and it is still the case today, that this overblown sense of honor would not allow a husband to let his wife now marry someone else. And there is absolutely no reason for this, because she is now absolutely free to do this. But he thinks that because she once remained his wife, now she should not go to any other person. Of course, this is plain hegemony. So the Quran has made this note of this, and it has actually directed husbands and actually warned them that this should not happen. So the verse in Surah Baqarah, the relevant verse reads, "And when you have divorced your wives and they have reached the end of their waiting period, do not prevent them from marrying their future husbands." See, this is what the Quran wants to underscore. Do not prevent them from marrying their future husbands if they have come to an agreement according to the norms of decency. These words of advice are given to every one of you who believes in Allah and the last day. This is more decent for you and more chaste. And in reality, Allah knows, but you do not. So the attitude of the husband has to be very conducive in this manner. If his wife, who is now no longer his wife, if he would like to marry someone else, it is her prerogative. He has no business in stopping her in any way. Now, the final thing which has to be now taken care of as well in post-divorce scenarios is the custody of the minors or the custody of the children. What would be the procedure here? The Shariah has not given any concrete directive in this regard, and it shows that basically the welfare of the children is what has to be taken into account. And if after divorce, with whom will the children go, whether it should be the mother or the father, or there should be a joint custody, there is no absolute ruling. And it does seem so that in all circumstances, it is the welfare of the children that has to be given importance. Thus, for example, if the divorced wife, she marries someone else, then she might lose this right to have young children, if the children are young, be with her. So in a similar way, if she does not marry and she has young children, then perhaps it is more beneficial for the children to be with her if she is a good mother. So there could be various scenarios, but in all scenarios, the guiding line is that the welfare and benefit of the children shall hold supreme. And I'm just going to narrate a few incidents that have been cited by Ustaz Ghamidi in his book, in which the custody of the minors was settled by the Prophet, and the guideline that was given as a result was that the welfare of the children is the real thing. Whether the custody should be with the father or with the mother, or should be joint or with someone else, there is no hard and fast rule in this case. It could be different in different situations. So let's just study some of these cases. First of them is cited by Abu Dawud. It says that Abdullah ibn Umar narrates that a lady came to the Prophet and said, "For this son of mine, it is only my belly which was his abode, and my breasts which were his vessel, and my lap which was his dwelling place. Now his father has divorced me and wants to take him away from me." The Prophet replied, "You are more entitled to keep him until you marry again." Again telling us, of course, that the welfare of the child rested with that lady because she was suckling her, and she was also not planning to marry anyone else. Another incident, this is now cited by Abu Huraira, also quoted in Abu Dawud. It says that Abu Huraira narrates that in his presence once a lady came to the Prophet. I heard her saying, "My husband wants to take away from me this child, even though he has brought over water from me from the well of Abu Amba and given me a lot of benefit." The Prophet replied, Both of you can cast a lot on this. Upon hearing this, the husband said, Who will quarrel with me regarding this son of mine? The Prophet asserted, O son, this is your father and this is your mother. Grasp the hand of the one you want to hold. The child grasped the mother's hand and she took him away. This is another case in which the Prophet actually gave the son or the child the discretion or the authority regarding the parents that he would like to live. So it seems that this was a case in which the child was now an adult child. He was grown up. And the Prophet, instead of asking the husband and the wife, because it seems that both of them had equal right, and they were both, it was difficult to give one more preference. So instead of doing it himself, the Prophet asked the child, whom would you like to go with? And the child said that he would like to go with the mother, and the Prophet allowed to do this. So these were two important examples that had occurred in the times of Prophet. Other than that, as I said, there is no strict ruling which you can find in the Sharia in any place. It is basically the welfare of the children that has to be kept in regard in all circumstances. So this brings us to an end to this whole topic of divorce. Inshallah, in our next sessions, we'll start off with some of the remaining directives. But just to summarize, that divorce is a methodology prescribed clearly in the Quran, and one often is guilty of not following this methodology. And the most important area of this methodology is that divorce has to be given with regard to the iddat, which means that it should be given, that the iddat has to be counted, because that iddat is going to determine whether the wife is pregnant or not, whether she needs to live with the husband or not, whether she can marry again or not, and of course the post-divorce scenarios, like for example suckling the child, for example marrying someone else. But the most important thing is that divorce is something which the Quran is prescribed as a separation which can be undertaken, but it has to be undertaken in a calculated way. It must not be done in frenzy, and if at all it is done in frenzy, then the intention of the person must be always asked. And if he says that he had no intention of divorcing the wife more than once, or maybe not even once, then if he does so on oath and circumstantial evidence also is in the favor of what he is testifying to, then his testimony shall be accepted, and either one of the divorce would be implemented, or if the thing is that he did not even want to give even a single divorce, then none of the divorce would be implemented. So this is what we can gather from Ruqana ibn Abd Yazid's incident that I just cited today. The Prophet actually signaled and he wanted to ask for the intention. And also we need to understand that the Caliph Umar's implementation of 3 divorces at the same time was an administrative decision, keeping in view the fact that people were misusing this divorce, and they were time and again violating the whole procedure. And the Prophet, and he said that, well, if you do it again, then I'm not going to take any intention into account, and I'm just going to implement it. But of course, as we can clearly see, that this was not the case in the times of the Prophet. In the times of the Prophet, it was always that he would ask for the intention of people. But now, later on, when Umar saw that people were not doing this properly, so he implemented this decision. And of course, we are free to revoke it as well, because it was an administrative decision. So in this regard, what the Prophet has done is something of a guiding light for all of us. So I now bring this topic to a closure, and if you have any questions regarding what we have studied regarding this topic of divorce, you may raise them now.
Thank you very much, Dr. The first question is regarding your last point about intention that you just made with Umar radiallahu anh. So the Quran prescribes to give divorce only once, but in the hadith where the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says that the person's intention should be taken into account, how can we reconcile between those two things?
So this is to be reconciled when the person has actually used those 3 chances that were given to him in one go. So he was given those 3 chances, and he was told that he should exercise them one by one on separate occasions. But he, either out of frenzy or out of a calculated intention, wanted to use all those 3 chances in one go. So if it was done in a calculated way, of course it would be implemented. But if it was done out of frenzy, then the Quran and then the Prophet tells us, or his guidance tells us, it shows us that we would now ask the person whether he actually wanted those three opportunities or those three chances to be exercised at the same time, or was it out of just frenzy that he uttered those three divorce sentences? So basically, yes, the questioner is right when he says or she says that the divorce has to be given once. That is the correct procedure. But we are talking about a violation of that procedure, and that is if a person does not adhere to that one divorce procedure and he either uses the three chances given to him knowingly, that he is, yes, he's using up them, or he's doing it out of frenzy. So the intention would be made clear. He would either say, yes, I'm using those three chances knowingly, deliberately, and therefore I have no qualms about it. Or he would end up saying that no, it was done out of frenzy, it was done out of anger. I became angry with my wife, and she was doing this and that, and she was provoking me, and I became so angry that I just would not resist myself. So you see, this is how the violation of procedure would be tackled.
So my question is that if the lady is living with parents for the last 6 months and she applied for the khula, and the khula procedure will take some time, and when the khula is implemented, do you think the lady should observe the iddat period?
Well, the iddat period, if the lady is about her certain that she's not pregnant, then she does not need to observe it. Remember, it is the pregnancy for which iddat has to be observed. So if she has had no contact with her husband for a reasonable amount of time and she's passing through her menstrual cycles, and a doctor also certifies that she's not pregnant, then in all such cases, and even other cases, iddat is not, if she wants, she's not required to observe it.
Okay, and the second question is that if the lady applied for the khula, so in that case, the husband give divorce her, and the husband did divorce her 3 times or 1 time, or what will be the procedure in that case?
Just once. Khula it just means that now the wife is asking for divorce. So whether the husband initiates the divorce, that has to be followed. The right to divorce is equal. The wife has also the right to seek divorce, and the husband also has the right to give divorce. Both have an equal right. The process of this is that the initiation of divorce shall always take place from the husband. So if he would like to divorce, of course he has the right to utter divorce. But if she would like to have herself divorced, then she would demand divorce from the husband. So the initiative of the divorce shall always be from the husband. And it should be just one divorce, whether it's khula or whether it's divorce from the husband.
And it's been implemented for the whole life, and in the next time, if they want to come back, they can do it. That because
yes, they can.
One.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
डॉक्टर साहब, जो आपने नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के ज़माने का जो आपने वाक़या बताया जिसमें वो खातून जो हैं वो गलत बयानी से उन्होंने काम लिया अपने हस्बैंड के बारे में, तो नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने जो उनको बात कही उनके बेटों को देख के, तो क्या वो एज अ पनिशमेंट उनको कह रहे थे ये बात, या फिर उन्होंने कहा कि ये हो नहीं सकता, मतलब ये कि तुम में नहीं हो सकती डिवोर्स, इस वजह से कहा?
Both was implied. He said that divorce shall not take place because, of course, you are doing something which is an outright lie. It's a falsehood, and it shall only take place if you are able to have sexual intercourse with your husband, and because you think that you cannot have him, you cannot have that intercourse with him, so therefore it shall never take place. So it was like a rebuke and a reprimand. It's like he was scolding her as well in a very subtle way, and also telling her that because she thinks that she can never have sexual intercourse with him, so she'll never stand separated, because the Prophet said you will only stand separated if you have that intercourse with him. But because you think that you can never have it, according to your own statement, so the obvious consequence was that the Prophet was telling her, in fact, that this divorce shall not take place because you are now lying. You're not telling the truth. You can see how you have produced 2 children right in front of you.
डॉक्टर साहब, और जैसे अब ये जो 3 तलाक़ें एक वक्त में देने का, जैसे कि हमारे माशरे में अहनाफ की तादाद ज़्यादा है, तो जब वो गुस्से में या उनके एंगर इश्यूज होते हैं या उनको इमोशनली ब्लैकमेल किया जाता है, तो वो 3 तलाक़ें देते हैं और फिर उसके बाद एक तबका ही बाकी बचता है अहले हदीसों का जिनके पास वो आते हैं और कहते हैं कि तो वो कहते हैं कि आप अहले हदीस हो जाएँ, तो फिर आपकी ये 1 तलाक शुमार होगी, वरना अगर आप अहनाफ में ही रहेंगे, तो वो आपकी तो 3 होंगी, शुमार होंगी। तो आपने जैसे बताया कि नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम पूछा करते थे कि आपका क्या इरादा था, आपकी इंटेंशन क्या थी? तो क्या आज के ज़माने में भी उनको ये पूछना चाहिए? क्योंकि बाज़ दफ़ा ये भी हो सकता है कि एट अ टाइम जिसने 3 दिए उसका 3 ही का इरादा है।
So you see, asking for the intention is a must in all periods of time. You see, if a person intends to use up all the 3 chances, this should be known. And if he did not have any intention, which is the case in most situations, that in most cases a person does not have the intention of even divorcing his wife once. It's only frenzy, and many a time it's the wife who provokes her husband, and asks her that divorce me, and she's angry and he's angry, and this takes place in this situation of anger. So intention has to be, in all circumstances, it has to be found out.
क्योंकि इस तरह तो पाकिस्तान की खासी तादाद जो है वो अहले हदीस होना पड़ रही है उनको इस वजह से कि वो कहते हैं कि आप 3 को हम एक ही शुमार करेंगे। और अहनाफ जैसे कहते हैं कि हजरत उमर अगर कोई नबी होता तो नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने कहा था कि उमर होते, तो इस वजह से हम उनके रूल को चेंज नहीं कर सकते, जबकि नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम का तो वही था कि वो एज अ मतलब ये कि एक ही तलाक शुमार।
It actually shows that it was an administrative decision. And if you read the narrative of Caliph Umar, in which he said that he'll implement this, he actually pointed this out, that people are becoming careless in giving divorces. They do so and then they revoke. So he said that, well, if you do it again, I'm not going to accept your intention. So if it is an announced statement given by a court of law or by the forum of the state that we shall not entertain any intention, then yes, this law can be made, because that would normally be the case when people are aware of the divorce procedure and they are trying to just be careless about it. So this was what had happened in the times of Caliph Umar. But today I would say that it is entirely opposite, that generally people are not even aware of the procedure of divorce, and they are told that unless they utter 3 divorce sentences, their divorce will not be valid. So this is something they need to get educated about. That every person who marries must know the procedure of divorce. It's not that until you pronounce 3 divorce sentences, that divorce becomes valid. It is actually totally reversed. The Prophet and the Quran are absolutely certain that they tell us that 1 divorce sentence is enough. And if the iddat period passes, you will still have the opportunity to marry that lady again, because now you're free to either marry someone else or marry each other again. So why would you like to use up those 3 chances in one go, if using them in one go or in just once would be sufficient for you to divorce her? Because this would always give you the chance to come back to one another.
जी, यहाँ पर तो भी यही बात है ना कि लोग अवेयर नहीं है, वो समझते हैं जब तक 3 नहीं देंगे उस वक्त तक होगी नहीं तलाक।
Right.
ओके, थैंक यू, बहुत शुक्रिया।
Shabnam, you're up next. Please go ahead.
थैंक यू मरियम। सर 2 क्वेश्चंस हैं। पहला तो ये सर कि हलाला के बारे में बात हुई, तो सर ये इन फर्स्ट प्लेस ओरिजिनेट कैसे हुआ? क्योंकि प्रॉफिट का ही आपने कोट किया कि आपने उस पर शख्स हलाला करने वाले पर लानत फरमाई है। तो सर क्या ये जो एक वाकया प्रॉफिट के दौर में हुआ जो आपने अभी बताया, तो क्या उसकी बेस पर लोग हलाला करना शुरू हो गए थे? क्योंकि तो प्रॉफिट टाइम
Yes, this is basically a misinterpretation of this narrative. I mean, this misinterpretation took place not into the Prophet's times, later on. So this narrative was made the basis.
सर प्रॉफिट ने तो हलाला करने वो हलाला होता होगा तो प्रॉफिट ने लानत की ना सर?
That is correct. So that is something which used to take place in the times of the Prophet as well, and he severely chastised such people. But it is beyond comprehension, and it is simply beyond comprehension that how can people do so. But one thing that might be of interest for you to note is that the narrative which says that the Almighty cursed the person who does halala and who conspires for it is not a very sound narrative. I mean, it's not authentically prescribed to the Prophet. So this could be one reason that they disregard this narrative.
राइट सर। और दूसरे सर ये जो प्रोसीजर है डिवोर्स का, सर ये भी अब जैसे आप इंटेंशन की बात कर रहे हैं कि प्रॉफिट ने पूछा कि 3 की थी या 1 की थी, और शुड बी कंसिडर्ड, लेकिन सर कुरान पाक में अल्लाह ताला ने एक प्रॉपर प्रोसीजर बताया है तो सर isn't it के इंटेंशन को छोड़ के ये मुस्लिम एक लॉ होना चाहिए कि उस जिसने देना है वो मतलब अल्लाह ताला ने सिर्फ रिकमेंड तो नहीं किया ना, छोड़ दिया तुम्हारी
Correct.
इंटेंशन पे,
Correct.
अल्लाह ताला ने तो
Correct.
एक ले आउट कर दिया।
So
तो
you're right, sir. The Almighty has prescribed a simple way that if you have to divorce your wife, just use your divorce option once, and that is all. So what we are dealing here is when people misuse or they actually do not follow the proper procedure. So what should be done if they violate this procedure? So basically, we are dealing with a violation of procedure.
सर वायलेशन को एक्सेप्ट नहीं करना चाहिए ना, बस लॉ होना चाहिए कि जो
As I
अल्लाह
said,
ने लॉ
at times we have to accept that violation because people are ignorant. People are not educated. So you see, it's not always the case.
सर ये तो फिर एजुकेट उन्हें बताना चाहिए कि नहीं हुई भाई,
Right.
समझे तो दोबारा क्या मसला।
Correct. So as I said, this is what should happen, that people should be educated. They should be told this is the correct procedure. And if you have done so in frenzy and anger, it shall not happen. So that is precisely why the intention has to be known. Because you see, at times a person can say that I gave those 3 divorce sentences out of willful intention. I fully know what the procedure is. I just want to use up those 3 chances.
सर
So
he
that
should
could
be
also be.
punished, he should be punished कि तुम अल्लाह के लॉ
As I
के
said,
क्या कर सकते
I mean, this could be, it could be a punishment when he's misusing it. But if he's doing it in his full intention, that he knows that he's using up those three chances, yes, he should still be told that why are you doing so. But for example, if he's done so with all his calculated intent, then all that we can tell him is that this is not the right way to do it, but we will accept your intention.
सर इज इट अलाउड क्यों, क्या ये तो हदीस की बेस पे हम बात कर रहे हैं ना, लॉ तो कुरान में पूरा लिखा हुआ है।
You see,
हम हदीस की बुनियाद पे उसके इंटेंशन को एक्सेप्ट करें।
no, it's not because of hadith, because the word 3, when it is, when you utter this word, it could be because of multiplicity and it could be because of an exact number. So you see, when you say something multiple times, this is also a common linguistic phenomena in the Quran as well, that when you are adopting a certain number, it could be you're not actually referring to the number, but you're just saying that, well, I will do it a number of times. And it could be because of the fact that you are just saying it out of intensity. So either it is intensity or it is something that you intend.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. I had a couple of questions for you. So the first one, when a man and women, they can no longer, given the 3 divorces, so now you said that the woman has to remarry and then naturally get divorced before she can remarry the first husband. What if a woman decides to not remarry, but the husband instead remarries and then gets divorced?
No, in that case would not be sufficient. That would not be sufficient. It has to be the wife. She has to, because you see, she would, only the wife who has to go through this procedure, not the other. Because you see, the purpose of this whole exercise is that divorce should not become child's play. And because the initiation of divorce is from the husband, so he should not use this procedure again and again and divorce his wife and then take her back, then again divorce her, then take her back. So it is like a warning sounded out to him that you have to be careful. And if you do it for the 3rd time, then remember that it's not easy for you to take her back, because now a whole different procedure would be is prescribed.
Thank you. That's awesome. Second question is, during the waiting period, if a woman, she's pregnant, they find out that she's pregnant, and then she decides to go for an abortion, does that still mean that, she can go through that and then only wait the 3 months?
Right. I mean, abortion is the same thing. I mean, if she's aborted a child, it's like that she's already given birth. I mean, of course, she's not given birth, but the child has been aborted. So whether she gives birth or whether the child gets aborted, it'll amount to the same thing. The iddat would end.
Okay. And then, very quick question: isn't it haram to have an expiration date on marriage to begin with?
Which date?
An expiration date on marriage, like planning that we'll only marry for like
Well,
X
I
amount
mean,
of time.
why? I mean, you see, this is against the spirit of marriage. Basically, the spirit of marriage is to live with one another for as long as you would like to. So if that condition is already there, if you can exercise that decision any time in your life, why should you restrict it? because that restriction would be against the spirit of marriage. If you have this restriction in mind, you can easily implement it anyway, in any case.
Right. I mean, like, can you say that it's haram to set a
I would
date to
not
begin
say,
with?
when the word haram is not the right word, I would say it's against the spirit of marriage. It's against the essence of marriage.
Okay.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
and if someone has to do it, he should have a mighty good reason for it. There could be exceptional situations, but that has to be. For example, if a person lives living in some country and he says that, well, I would not be in a position to take you to my home country, and as long as I live in this country, you'll be my wife. But once I leave this country, I mean, this is how it will happen, that I'll just go away without taking you. So, as I said, this could be a very exceptional circumstance. And if the wife agrees to it, then yes, of course, this is okay in certain circumstances. But then, of course, it can also be argued that if this does take place, then why would he need even to divulge this? Let it happen naturally, and bring it in the information of your wife at the time that happens. Maybe the situation never arises, and maybe it arises even before that he had it in mind. So I think it's better to keep your options open, because seeking divorce for the wife and giving divorce by the husband, these are options which are available all the time to both.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Saleem. We have another question in the chat that asks, what if a couple does halala and have children later, and then they later realize about their mistake? What can be done?
Well, as I said, it will be decided on a case-to-case basis. If they have done halala, that would mean that the children is from the person with whom the halala was done. Of course, because the nikah was actually conducted, so she would be a legal mother of those children. I mean, the mother, the question of being not the mother does not arise at all. But of course, the whole procedure is something which as I said, it stinks. But because of the fact that she has now become pregnant as a result of that procedure, and now she is going to go back to the first husband. So yes, she will be still the mother of those children, although she would be divorced from that second husband as well, because now he has also divorced her, so that she can go back to the first husband.
If a man gives only one divorce and didn't continue his relationship, other than what will be the next order for women?
Well, if he has given one divorce and the iddat period it expires, then now both are free to choose. Either they can once again marry one another, or each of them can marry someone else.